Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
We are back now with our friend Kate Panaccione, who's a friend of the show, who's been with us for quite some time, talking in regards to how she helps so many people. She's the director of Square Peg Consulting, and I'll have her introduce herself. Welcome back, Kate.
Thank you. Hi, Jill. It's good to be here. Yes, Square Peg Consulting is I have a consulting firm that specializes in special education matters. So parents or attorneys or school districts or governments look to me for assistance with solving special education issues.
And you've been in business for how long, helping others? And I know in the education business for quite some time. Would you mind just sharing a little bit of your background?
Yes, my education, I've been in education for 30 years, over 30 years. I have a doctorate in special education, and I've worked with every age group from birth through transition into adult services. I've worked in public and private schools. I've worked internationally and in the United States. So I've also served on school boards and on research committees. So my background is quite varied, actually.
Perfect. Well, you're a great advocate for so many people. What did you have in store for us today for our conversation with the type of services and how you can help our listeners out there?
I thought what I would do is just run through the basics of an IEP. What that is it's an individual education plan. And any child that receives special education services has an IEP.
Okay.
And it's a document that's actually set out the standards are according to educational law, which special education is. It's a set of laws. And so I just kind of wanted to demystify it for parents and people listening. What it is it's a document that just covers the individualized needs of a particular child. So no IEP is like another one. Mm-hmm. They're all specific to the child's needs. So the parts, I think one good thing to remember for parents is if you've never been through the process before, it's a good idea to sort of just Google your state and then type in the letters IEP.
Okay.
And what it does is it brings up a copy of what your state uses as a template for an IEP. So that when you go to the first meeting, you won't be blown away by how many pages. These documents are often 15 and more pages long. So that can be pretty intimidating when you're, as a parent, when you're sitting at a meeting and somebody pulls out a 15-page document on your child.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So it's helpful to just sort of look at one, see what they look like, kind of just look at the different parts of it. And then the team, the people that get together to talk about what your child needs, they're the ones that decide what gets put onto the IEP. Now, most places and most teachers draft an IEP. That means they just sort of fill in all of the details of the IEP before the meeting, because a lot of it is sort of boilerplate, like any form. It'll have your child's date of birth and what eligibility they were identified under. We had talked about that in an earlier show. And so that all of that information is sort of boilerplate. Then the parts that come up are parents often wonder, well, who's part of that team? Who's going to be sitting at the table? There's certain people that are required by law to be at the table, and the parents are number one.
Yep.
And the school district needs to make a really honest effort at including the parent and arranging a meeting at a time that's convenient for everyone. Now, that doesn't mean that school districts have to keep their teachers extra late. If parents say, I work during the day, I can't take a day off. Parents and school districts need to work together and sometimes be a little bit creative to make sure that everybody can get to the table at the same time, because there's a lot of people involved. There's the special education teacher, there's a general education teacher, there's an administrator, and their
Wow.
job is to approve any funding that might be needed for the child. And then you've got any other specialists that might be involved. For example, a speech and language therapist or occupational therapist, or if your child needs physical therapy. All of those people, it's hard to get meetings sometimes. So everybody needs to be flexible and creative in finding ways to get together to meet that child's needs. So
And this year, how has that changed for you? Everything with COVID and the pandemic, how did that affect the schools and the children?
it,
Greatly, I'm sure. And will some of those new patterns continue of this virtual type of meeting and lifestyle?
I think that it will continue, partly because it's more convenient at times. If parents can't take time off from work, perhaps they can take a break when they can Zoom in to a meeting and be able to at least have their concerns and their desires heard. I also think too, what's important to remember during the pandemic for everybody is that everyone's trying this new way of learning and everyone's on a learning curve. Some are better than others, but children with IEPs are still required to have services.
Okay.
We had talked before about the importance of meeting children with special needs along with the regular class. That if you teach to every child in that classroom, that includes the child that learns the slowest, all children's progress increases across the board. And the reason that happens is because it makes teachers think creatively. And if teachers are able to just see issues when they come up and try to find creative ways to assist children in learning, everybody feels vested and involved. Enjoy, teachers can enjoy the wonderful gifts that every child brings to the classroom. And that happens electronically and in person. So yes, and also with COVID, there's a lot of children that are behind on their evaluations for special education. That's because evaluations require certain components, and it's not always easy to get those different pieces together when people are meeting virtually. I think it will be interesting in the fall.
Yeah.
Because children, they're finding that the new variant of COVID is impacting children quite significantly. So nobody really knows what's going to happen this fall as far as classes and what the requirements will be. So I think everyone needs to kind of have an open mind and work with their school districts and their parents, because it's a trying time for everybody. And everybody's doing the best they can with what they have.
Yeah.
So I think it's
Absolutely.
important to keep that in mind. But that being said, children with special education deserve certain services under the law, and that's what their IEP says. So I'm going to go back to that and talk
Sure.
about some of the parts of the IEP, what it includes.
Okay.
So it has a section that lists out their present level of performance. And that's important because we need to know, where's the child starting? Otherwise, we don't know where to begin. As teachers, that's why teachers evaluate children so much. They do assessments in the classroom to just kind of figure out where the class is and what they need to teach. So before a child is identified, they've had a whole battery of assessments done. We take all of that information and decide, okay, where do they need help? Let's assume that they're going to need help in reading and spelling, and maybe the child is also incredibly disorganized. So that means that those three areas, if they meet the criteria for special education services, we would write goals in each of those areas. We would write a goal for reading, we would write a goal for organization, perhaps, and then a goal for spelling. We don't need goals in an area where the child is getting along fine. So this only addresses the areas of need. That's important to remember. Every IEP on it has a section for which this is my favorite section. It's the part that explains what is that child good at?
Yeah.
Where do they excel? Because every child excels in certain areas. And this is a place for parents to really share all those wonderful things about their child, their sense of humor, or maybe they're really good about, compassion and understanding people that need something extra. Maybe, all of those wonderful qualities our children have should be on this document because it's important. I think oftentimes children that have special needs hear what they can't do an awful lot.
Oh,
So we want to say, what can they
and
do?
they do. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's an important part of it. Then what we do is we consider there's conditions that we look for in every child that we want to actually check off for, and that is, do they need any accommodations?
Okay.
In different areas to learn, to help them learn? Do they need technology at all? And that can be high tech or low tech. That could be something as easy as, do they need assistance with maybe for spelling, they need some word banks, something like that. Okay, so those all go in there. And then if a child has any behavioral concerns, that's typically addressed as well. We need to look at if they have limited English proficiency, because we've talked before how those children are over-identified for special education,
Okay.
meaning that oftentimes that child doesn't have a disability, they just need to learn the language.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference. So it asks that question specifically. And then we make sure that if the child has any visual impairments, do they need Braille? Do they need enlargers? That kind of thing. So we ask all of those questions, regardless of what the identification is, because we don't want to miss anything.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The next thing that we want to talk about when we're doing an IEP is the academic part of it. So that's where we write our goals. And our goals are specific to what the child tested low in.
Okay.
So for spelling, we can get really specific with those assessments, and we can say that what they have a hard time with spelling is maybe they phonetically can't sound words out. So maybe that's why they're having a difficulty. So maybe they need instruction in phonetics.
Okay.
Like those are all those blends and what do vowels say kind of instruction. And that's all that means. Now, if a child has work habits or study skills that need to be addressed, and I think every child does. I mean, almost every adult does.
Yeah, we all
When we
do.
think
Yeah.
about it. But executive function skills are writing goals for things like if your child has a hard time planning, like if you were to tell your child, go get a bag ready for what you need at camp, and they don't even, they can't even find the bag.
Yeah.
Never mind, what am I supposed to put in it?
Mhm.
That's pre-planning. So there's different executive function skills. Maybe your child gets everything done. I know my son would do all of his homework. I would sit there and watch him and make sure it was all done. He would finish it. I would say, put it in your backpack. Somehow it never got to the teacher. He was one of those kids that just would lose things.
Yeah.
And so that's actually a work completion task. He
Okay.
would think he was done and it would be gone out of his mind and he would never think of it again. Only it wasn't done until the teacher had it on their desk.
Yeah. True. Mm-hmm.
So we can write goals for each one of those specific target areas. So that's why when you're talking to teachers and you want to point out all the great things about your child, because you want to say, you know what, they're really good at follow through. When I ask him to do something, he's really great about getting up and doing it right away. Or maybe he struggles with that, Those are really important because that directly relates to a child's ability to attend. there's always children that daydream in class. That's because they don't have that frontal lobe is not fully developed, that part of their brain that's like right above their eyes on their eyebrows. That's not fully developed in males, and sometimes until they're 26 years old.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's why when I know, isn't that
I'm
amazing?
like, that makes sense. I'm thinking, yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
So
It's
it's not their fault. It's not their intentional. I'm
That's
thinking,
what you have to remind yourself. You have to say it's not their fault. The poor things, their brain isn't fully developed yet. Whereas girls' brains actually mature at a faster rate, and they're often done developing at 18 years of
yeah.
age. And that's also part of the reason why boys and girls do learn differently. Just the types of learning that they do. There's different learning profiles.
Yeah.
I always have this great example for a workshop I do with parents on executive function skills about that if a wife asks her husband, and I don't mean to be sexist,
No.
to stop at the grocery store on the way home and says, pick up,
A, B,
milk. I
C.
want you to pick up milk, jelly, and bread. And the guy going to the grocery store thinking, okay, it's only three things. It's only three things. Whereas a woman, the way she plans it out is she's thinking in her head, where's the milk? Where's the jelly? Where's the bread? I'm going to walk through this store so I know what to grab on the way.
Best plan of attack. Yeah, they don't do that.
They don't typically do that. No, they're focused on, I need three things. This is what they are. So it takes them a lot longer to find those things once they're in the store.
Can I be honest? A lot of times they come home with just one or two and they forget three. But
They forget the third. Yeah, they're focused on the wrong thing. That's
I
all.
write it down, I text it, and it's always, oh, I didn't know. Oh, I forgot. Oh, and
Yeah.
I'm like, enough excuses.
It's because they process information differently. So you need to figure out what we have to do with children is figure out how is it that you hear this information and hang on to it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what processing is. When I'm telling you something as a student, if you're a teacher and you're listing this really rapid fire, don't forget on your way out the door, your homework is, and then all of a sudden they list it all. There is probably almost a third of that class that as soon as they heard on the way out the door, everything was shut off and they didn't hear a word after it.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the kinds of things you need to pay attention to in learning and address them on a child's IEP.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what helps. It is. And it also helps people understand some children have extremely slow, what we call processing speed. And that's that ability to quickly shift through imagine your mind is like a giant file cabinet. How quickly can you sift through all those files and pull out the ones you need? Some people are very, very fast at processing. Teachers are typically very fast at processing. Children typically are very slow at processing. So it's oftentimes children with special needs might have a delay of up to 15 seconds of processing time. That's a long time.
Yeah.
That they have to actually think about how to complete a task. How do I even go about that? Well, the child has to think of, I need a pencil. I need to find my paper. What number was it she said to do? I can't remember now because she said it
so long ago. And wow.
Yeah. So a lot of it is developmental. Your children are supposed to be slow at this because we haven't, the whole idea of school is to teach them those skills.
Mm-hmm.
So it depends on what developmental level they're at. You have young children, you know what you can expect of them.
Yeah, 4 and 6. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not taking your full 4-year-old into a gym and expecting him to sit quietly. He's going to be running around and having a blast.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because that's what he's supposed to do.
Yeah.
So it's important to keep in mind what the developmental level of the child is when we're developing these goals for them. On an IEP, also the goals are written for a full year. So what we need to look at is, what do we think this child can learn in 1 year's time? And some of us have over expectations. We think, oh man, they should have like this whole reading thing down pat. They should be reading, you know, 8 grade level books in a year. But that's not how it works. Because when a child has a disability, that means it's harder for them than other children to learn that. So it takes a little longer, takes extra practice. So when you see your child's IEP goals, they're written so that you know exactly what it is your child needs. Maybe your child has no problem at all sounding out words. And so when you sit next to them and you point to a word in their storybook and they can say it back to you, that's great. But then you ask them, "Oh, so what did
What did?
what did the bus driver do?" And they have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
So they can decode words, but they're not comprehending. So those are the things you really want to pay attention to as a parent, so that when you're home with your child, you can support their needs.
Mm-hmm.
You can say, "Oh, how do we know what the bus driver did?" We can look at the pictures. That's always a clue. We can look at the words around it. We can always go back because it's written right there.
Mm-hmm.
And teach our children all of those little cues that we use in everyday life for how to figure things out.
Wow.
I always find it fascinating that children with dyslexia are often able to hide the fact that they have such difficulty with reading for
Really?
years
Really?
because they compensate in other ways. They pick up on all of those other clues and use context clues instead. So it's important to notice that their strength is context,
Okay.
that they look to the context of things. And that's an amazing ability. And we need to highlight those abilities. We need to lift children up. And that's how to do it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Never then didn't even think about that.
It's wonderful. It's, when you think about that, all of it, even when we have children that have behavioral issues, we don't ever deal with them in a way that is punishing,
Mm-hmm.
because it doesn't work. It doesn't work with anything. It doesn't work with lab animals. What works is rewarding the behavior you want to see.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot harder to do as a parent.
Oh yeah.
If you ask your child to set the table and they do, I mean, do you think, oh man, I need to praise them? You think, no, they did that's what I asked. But if we as parents and teachers are able to reinforce when our child is doing what we expect, that's when it really pays off. That's when
Wow.
a child can feel really uplifted and proud of what they're doing, and they want to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
That's why things like charts work. You know, I want you to pick up your room every day. And if you can do it for 3 days in a row, we'll start this little chart. And every 3 days in a row that you pick up your room, you get to have this prize of dessert or whatever it is. Those are things that's called positive reinforcement. And in IEPs, we want to look for that positive reinforcement. We need to say, wow, look at this. Before, you weren't able to read any of these words and you couldn't spell any of these
Right.
words.
Yeah.
And now look at this list of words that you can spell. That's giving a child the motivation to learn more, the motivation to be engaged in their learning.
Wow.
Children should go to their IEP meetings. I think at any age that they're able to tolerate them.
Mm-hmm.
They need to be able to hear the wonderful things about themselves.
Yeah. Which sometimes as parents you forget to do because you're so discombobulated in other aspects, and we are we have different tolerance and we forget. You're right. Highlight the good. And this is for everyone out there. And you're teaching me today too. As a parent, the better way to be and more positive reinforcement. I thank you for that.
And that's a good thing to say to children. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
If your child gets right in the car and sits right in their car seat, ready to be buckled in, and you buckle them in, you just say, thank you for that. Thank you for being ready.
Yeah.
They learn the respect of that. That's what teachers do every single day.
Mm-hmm.
Teachers are going to help parents through this IEP process. It's overwhelming at first. Parents will feel like there's not enough time because everything can't be explained, and a teacher's trying to get through this 15-page document in an hour.
Wow. Yeah.
It's not easy for anybody. It really isn't. The teacher, by the time they have an IEP drafted, the teacher has already spent hours learning what it is that your child needs to support them.
Wow.
So some of it is trust and working with the teacher and building that relationship so that you feel like, okay, that teacher knows my child. They know my child's strengths and they know their weaknesses, and they want to support my child. And how can I help with that? That's the question we all need to ask. How can we help that child do so? Ask teachers, what can I do to support all of those goals while I'm at home?
Yeah.
Because learning doesn't happen in isolation. It doesn't stop at the classroom. Learning happens everywhere.
Yeah. Great.
There is a section that's important on the IEP that's called, that lists out exactly what it is each child receives for services. That just gives the times and the dates and things like that. And then you will get something called a prior written notice after it's all said and done. I don't know why they call it that, because it's actually, it's called prior,
but it's
given to you after the meeting.
Okay, got it. Mm-hmm.
The reason it's called that is because that's the document that the parent has to sign saying, okay, yes, you have my permission to offer these services to my child.
Okay.
That's why they call it that.
Okay.
So it should be filled out pretty completely. And if it's not, you might ask the school district to include certain things. It says like what it is that the school district is proposing. For example, we're writing an IEP. The IEP has these goals. And then it asks why is the school district either proposing or refusing specific services? That again, it should almost read like minutes to the meeting, because that's exactly what it is. It's like they hand you this piece of paper after, and they say, here, this is what we talked about today. Do you agree? Parent has to sign it. And not until that is signed are they able to start delivering services.
Got it. And we are just about out of time with a minute left here, Kate. What else do you want to add and leave with us today?
I guess I always want to lead positively, as every child should, that even if a child has learning needs, that's what school's for. Yep. That's why they're there. Don't look at it as a negative. It's something that's there to support your child and work on that relationship so that even if you feel a teacher isn't doing what they need to do, ask them how you can help. Ask the special education director, what can I do to support my child? Beautiful. When we lift up the ones that are the slowest, we lift up everyone.
Beautiful. Kate, if someone wants to contact you, let us know how.
Yes, they can contact me at my company. It's kate@squarepeged.com, or they can reach me by telephone at 603-828-7961.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for enlightening us and for doing what you do. Have a great day.
You too.
And to all of our listeners, stay tuned. More of the show is coming up after the break. Please don't go anywhere.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.